Alright, so here's my review of Halo Episode 2. So, compared to last week, just right out of the gate, this wasn't a very action-heavy episode compared to last week. Last week's was very much action-focused, very much showed the brutality of war. This was more of a dialogue episode that was more for world-building and backstory. That being said, the world-building and backstory were actually very interesting. I really enjoyed seeing kind of Master Chief's backstory. And again, this is coming from somebody who hasn't played the games and is just reviewing this as a show called Halo with interesting world building, which I thought was really well done. And we get to learn more about this MacGuffin, right? This object that the villains in the show are trying to find that is somehow connected to Master Chief. And I'm very intrigued to kind of see what they're going to do with this and where this is going to go and why this is the MacGuffin of the show. Like, what is this very specific purpose for this object? Why do they want it? And intrigued to see as I keep learning about what's going on. And I love how his friend Sorin, he's introduced at the very beginning of the episode, and then he comes back later, a few years later. And their dynamic was really well done. Their dynamic between Master Chief and Sorin I thought was great, because both of them have been in the army, except Sorin is more of a questioner. He doesn't really believe the things that he's been programmed to believe. And of course, Master Chief is very much bred to be the perfect soldier. And I was getting very many vibes of that one Clone Wars episode where Captain Rex finds that one clone that was a deserter and then started a family with the one Twilight girl and was like, well, we're free beings and I had the freedom to choose to get married and have this kid. And it very much reminded me of that episode. Also, I really liked that he was kind of a likable character too. Like, he was very much the serious soldier, but he also had kind of a bit of a sarcastic and humorous side to him as well, where he's like, when you're in here, you don't want to talk to anybody. No, bro, I'm just kidding. So he very much is still very much buddy-buddy with Master Chief, even though he was kind of separated from all those years, and even though he's still kind of a soldier, he still kind of has a little bit of a humorous side to him. Also, I know it's a very brief cameo, because he's only in this episode for like 30 seconds, but I can't remember the actor's name, but he plays Gottlieb in Pacific Rim. And even with those like 30 seconds or so that he's in this episode, I very much was getting like General Hux vibes from him, or Governor Tarkin vibes, whatever you want to call it. Star Wars Empire vibes. He's very ruthless. Even in, the very, very brief scene that he's in this episode, he was still very ruthless. And I'm kind of hoping to see more of him. Maybe they really expand his villainous side of him. And finally, I'm kind of still wondering kind of what is up with the character of Halsey. I'm very interested in her motivations. She's a very compelling villain. I kind of want to see what's her game. Why is she playing the long game? What does she want? What are her motivations? She's a very interesting, very intriguing, very compelling villain. And I'm excited to kind of see where the story goes. So this was a slower episode with a lot less action. But even though it was very dialogue heavy, it was still very interesting dialogue. I thought built the narrative in interesting ways. I'm still really intrigued by the story. I'm still really intrigued by this universe. I can't wait to see where it goes next week.